Welcome to Breaking Banks Africa. I'm Matteo Rizzi, and together with my co-host Nadine Doro, let us take you on a journey of entrepreneurship, innovation, and vibrant ecosystems Africa has to showcase. More than 1 in 4 people will be African by 2050, this continent being already the youngest of the planet. You can't miss these stories. This is Breaking Banks Africa. Let's roll. Hey guys, welcome back to Breaking Banks Africa. My name is Matteo Rizzi, the executive producer of the show. This is episode 12. Time flies. We are already at 1 year of Breaking Banks Africa, and we picked Shirley Mburu, my friend from BFA Global, head of advisory business Africa, to close up this year. Shirley, welcome to Breaking Banks Africa.
Thanks, Matteo. It's a pleasure being here, and I'm excited to speak with you.
So Shirley was introduced to me by a very good friend from that we collaborate with at the Gates Foundation. And we had an incredible sort of introductory chat a couple of months ago. And I wish that we, some of the topics that we talked about back then, we could share them today. Shirley, why don't we start by you giving us a little bit of your background? Where are you based? What's your daily job? And, a bit more about yourself.
Great. So I am a development finance specialist. I am based out of Nairobi. I have been working within this space for the last 12 years. My biggest motivators are impact, wanting to create impact, which is not always so easy, but also using tools that I'm well conversant with, and that is financial tools, as well as innovation and technology within the space.
So tell us a little bit more about the work you do at BFA Global, and the reason is I don't want you to BFA is not sponsoring the show, guys. So it is simply because the first topic I really want us to talk about is this dichotomy between impact and return. That most of the African investors are looking for. Myself, since I worked for a media exactly 10 years ago, that was already the thesis.
Yeah.
I believe that thesis has evolved a little bit. It's still challenging. So, and this is, one of the reason why BFA Global exists, right? So give us a bit more context, please.
Okay. So BFA Global is a development consulting firm. We focus on advisory work. And when I talk about advisory, the way I explain it to the everyday person that I meet is basically this is research, really understanding deeply what the issues are that face lower income or underserved segments, and then forming recommendations around that. So that type of advisory work may be for a development agent, it may be for a government looking into policies, it may be for a financial service provider or a fintech looking to serve the segments that not everybody sees as a low-hanging fruit. The other arm of BFA is really around venture building and investments. So this is where we identify our two main streams are climate techs, fintechs and job techs, job platforms, which have been at the core of how do we create jobs, how do we improve livelihoods through various options. And what we do in this particular area of work is we work hand in hand with the different organizations or different entities that we source. We provide technical assistance, but we also provide some form of funding, be it grant funding, returnable grant funding, or even equity funding at the later stages. And this enables them really to work deeply with our experts to improve their operational capacity, to improve how they structure their products for these segments, and to be better able to deploy those services and products that are value enhancing. And then also giving them the capital or the funding that will enable them to implement the different changes that we recommend or work with them.
Amazing. And, for the ones that have been following the show, a lot of the topics that you have discussed are not only close to to what we use to talk about, but also to my own art. The capacity building, the underserved communities, and now I want to switch from a professional question to a personal question. Okay, Shirley. So, as an African, as a Kenyan, what does it mean for you create impact for underserved communities? I mean, because you live in what I call the poster child of the countries of financial inclusion, right? So if someone just know Kenya, and I want to even say if someone just know Nairobi, Nairobi is actually even more efficient than some of the European capital I've been with in terms of digital payments, digital financial inclusion. Of course, there is a lot of gap, between, and there is a new middle class coming over, but, is not really representative of an underserved Africa, right? What does it mean? What does it mean for you to work and to look at this type of, let's say, environment as well?
Okay. And Matteo, I think that particular question also begs for me to be very, very vulnerable as to why I work in the space that I work. And I will start from there. I think leaving university, my academics was all in the traditional finance space. And at that point, I really understood risk and return, which is the basis of traditional, finance. But I was researching and looking into what I could master in. And at that point, you're at a crossroad where you feel that your work or your life has to be more meaningful. And that is why I wanted it to really count on what I end up specializing in. And then I came across work, say, done by Senfree around financial inclusion, understanding microcredit, microinsurance, payments, remittances, you name it all. And that really resonated with me on how I could move towards that sort of development finance space. And that's where I've been. Why it resonated with me as an African is finance is good. Finance can help you create opportunities for yourself and others. Finance can help you build generational wealth and for generations to come. Finance can also help you mitigate risks. So in terms of when you're sick, how can you get good care and quality care? All that can be enabled by finance. When you don't have resources, how can systems help you to put or pool together resources, say from your relatives abroad? That's where payment and digital rails come in. What does it mean for me in Africa? At the end of the day, some of the things I aspire to do is create more jobs in Africa. So creating more opportunities in Africa. And the question is, how can finance help within that space to create more jobs? It could be by accelerating SMEs and medium enterprises who are the job creators in the continent to absorb more people. It could be mitigating shocks or helping people have more agency, make better decisions for their lives, be able to provide for their families, care for their families in the midst of different shocks. Like what you'll see, and you say Kenya is a poster child, but I think some of the things resonate more widely across Africa. Like some of the deepest needs that come across from Kenyans anytime we do the financial diary studies or we do the FinAccess studies is them needing support, say, to educate their children. That's usually like the number one need. Because that's a long-term investment, right? If you invest in your children. And the other one is health. You could have a good job today, you fall sick, you don't have insurance, and you sell your land, sell your assets, and you're back to where you started from in terms of building that journey or that ladder. So those are the things that for me matter in terms of creating impact. It's that improvement of livelihoods and incomes, as well as helping people adapt and become more resilient in the face of shocks, as well as taking advantage of opportunities.
How does that the perspective changes from, let's say, cities, urban areas versus rural ones? And the reason why I'm asking this question is because, one of the latest grants of the Gates Foundation is for a lab in Benin. I believe it's run by IIDIA, if I'm not mistaken, and that's focusing on financial literacy for the 5 million people that only speak a local dialect. So of course they don't understand English well. So the way you build financial inclusiveness for people that doesn't have the same background, that you and me, or even way less than this. They can't even speak English. It changes a lot. What is your experience? What can you tell the world about it?
Yeah. So the experience between urban and rural is really diverse. You'll find that in urban areas, a lot of people are exposed to information. A lot of people, there's electricity. A lot of these areas are electrified. So that means that you can, operate a smartphone more reliably. You probably have data, so the information flows to you are much better. The infrastructure is more developed in that there are schools to educate your children. When you go to the rural areas, these are areas that are harder to serve. And so a lot of these infrastructure and opportunities are not present to date. That means that any solutions that you provide to people in rural areas have to be adopted for that particular context, or may be harder to reach in the sense that it may be more expensive to particularly serve those people because they're just more far-flung, there is no infrastructure. So you sort of build in the rails that do not currently exist there. You spoke of financial literacy. It's something, I guess, we take for granted, those of us who live in the rural areas and have information. But one example I was referring to, we did some work earlier in the days in the northern Kenya, which is very remote and desolate and not properly served. And just introducing the concept of banking, you'll be surprised, does not resonate with many. There was a lady there who, when we got her into a focus group to understand her banking experience, she did not trust the institution. Why? Because she took her savings there, and when she went to collect her savings, she did not receive the same notes and coins that that she had provided to the bank. So sometimes it can be as extreme as just the basic understanding. And where do you start with such a person? It's really building trust, walking them through that, and making sure that the product fits how they understand, or that hand holding, so they can be able to use that product accordingly. And yeah, Matteo, I hope I've answered your question in terms of how extreme that like urban to rural can be. Whereas with rural, you may be building from the very basics because the populations there have been systemically disenfranchised or not served by education, electricity, and other infrastructure. That's key. And then in urban areas where people have a lot of information, there's infrastructure, and they've been able to, they can be able to take on the products that you actually provide.
Really double clicking on financial literacy, I want to pick on one of the things that as BFA Global you guys do, which is supporting entrepreneurs. And I want to be specific when you mention the funding part of the job, because sometimes you talk about grants. In some cases you take equity. In some cases, a non-equity investment, which is different from a grant. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because not later than this morning, and apologies, I don't have the name, but of the bank, I think it's Diamo, or Jamo, I could be wrong, but we were talking about a digital bank for Francophone Africa that received $5 million in equity. And but of course, Wave then kicked in, providing the same capabilities, and all of a sudden, that investment seemed, let's say, a lot less compelling, if you want to. And that article was actually tackling the issue of the financial illiteracy for entrepreneurs that get funding. And I'm not saying that startup was a part of it, but I guess what I'm going is that people usually don't realize that giving $2 million to an African entrepreneur doesn't have the same weight or of giving $2 million to a French entrepreneur, right? Simply not because France is different. It is, of course, but when you give $2 million in funding into a context where with that you can pay 3 times better, any resource that you can find, and you become, you play a completely other game in terms of capacity building. But also, if as an entrepreneur you don't have the right maturity, it's not easy to be able to use wisely that capital. So on one hand, and I know that this question is getting long, but let's say that is not even a question. It's me participating to the debate with my own experience, because I saw a lot of entrepreneurs, burning badly the capital they raised and putting themselves in a situation simply because they didn't have the right advice. Okay, put it this way. What is your experience, and how can we help African entrepreneurs to be wiser in a way they manage their capital?
That's a good question. And I have two frames of mind. So the question is, how can we help African entrepreneurs to be wiser in the way they, I guess, use up or utilize their capital? I think there are two sides of the coin. There's the element where you've given this African entrepreneur 2 million versus giving a French entrepreneur 2 million. This African entrepreneur has many more hurdles than the French entrepreneur in terms of what they have to face or build out. One of the realities that I'm sure Matteo has been apparent to you is that, and you've seen supporting different innovators, they enter into the space wanting to specialize and provide one offering, which is what we are all taught, right? What is your value proposition? And then prioritize what is that one thing that you're going to do very well that is going to enter the market from which you can build all these others much later. But the moment they enter the market, they realize the rails are broken or they're not there. Then they begin building out the different rails. And then you find this one innovator is doing 5 different things in that one business. And that has been what has been happening for a very long time. I think it's changing, but what I'm trying to say is that 2 million, it has so many more uses, or rather, so much is demanded of that 2 million in Africa than it is in France, where the rails have already been built out. Then the other side of the coin is that you're right. There is some support that could benefit African innovators in terms of how they utilize their resources to then make sure that they've optimized and they grow their enterprises. And one of the things we do as BFA Global, and one of the, we employ this in all our programs because we believe it's important, is technical assistance. So we always provide technical assistance and match it with funding. And we do pride ourselves in saying that we don't provide that one-stop shop, basic training that you provide to every other enterprise. It's not classroom technical assistance where you come for 2 weeks and we tell you what you're going to do with your money. No, it's very much tailored to each entity that we work with. Yes, there may be certain buckets in terms of what that technical assistance is. Obviously, there's product refinement, there's building data analysis and platforms and dashboards around that. There's fundraising, there's sales. So they're different buckets, but one entity may only need 1 or 2 of those. And the way we go about it is that from day one, the first thing we do is understand what are your capabilities, what are your strengths, where are your weak areas. And then we agree in terms of these 5 areas, which are the priority ones, but in the sense of which ones will unlock you or get you further in your journey, in the journey that you're looking to develop. And then we work and narrow down on that, bringing in expertise within our organization, but also external like consultants that we've worked with repeatedly over different interventions. So I think there are 2 sides to that, where African entrepreneurs are, they know the market and they know what they need to optimize, but there's also the benefit that they can get from providing tailored support to optimize and make their funding runway go much longer.
In fact, I wanted to how to say it, to edit a little bit what I said earlier, because I don't want to sound like it's the fault of the entrepreneurs, that the $2 million in Africa are not the same $2 million in France. It's actually the ecosystem that is not equipped, that is equipped in a very different way, where, in France or in Italy or in Spain or even in Portugal, there are 10 BFA Global already equipped. Maybe they are all working in the same free startup hub where everyone can access, and things that are, so straightforward, such as the juridical way of structuring your own company, is literally one conversation away. But as an African entrepreneur that is focusing on the business, maybe you're not optimizing taxes, or you haven't been exposed to understand, what structuring a company means, So that's, but I think you illustrated super, super well. And I want to talk a little bit about a specific program that you have been involved with, which is this Africa Blue Wave, because you mentioned two. I love the name as well already. But you mentioned fintech, but also this climate tech, green tech, I want to say area or business or ecosystem, which I believe it goes really hand in hand, with financial inclusion and also fintech, if you want to, not only because the last mile is always a payment, but also because there are strong financial implications that are a good consequence of making Africa's business sustainable. Can you talk us a little bit about this?
Yeah. So Matteo may have a bit of history with BFA. So we always pride ourselves in being at the frontier. So working at the next opportunity that will change or will impact the underserved segment. And over the years, so we worked with fintech, we built evidence around that, we built a fund around that. But then we continuously realize that the same people that we aim to serve are the same people that are being impacted by climate change. So the smallholder farmer, the MSMEs. As we know, Africa is an economy that is very reliant on natural resources, and those are the same resources coming under a lot of pressure when you talk about climate change. So in addition to finance, which we knew really well, the question is, are we adopting solutions for climate, making sure that we have climate in mind to be able to solve for the challenges that come from that? If you don't have a goal towards something, you will never create a solution that targets that. So we needed to be more intentional around that. So we started thinking about this, put a coalition together, which we call the CIFA Alliance, other thought partners, financial service providers, in terms of how can finance be leveraged to solve for climate solutions. As a result of that, the TECA program was born, and I was deeply honored to be part of the team that, or rather to lead the design of that particular program, and particularly get it off the ground in terms of implementation. And what it's about is that we don't have a shortage of resources or talent in Africa. Also, this talent really deeply understands the problems that are within the African continent. But the question is, how do you match funding or bring it closer to that talent base? And then also experiences from more developed worlds, from researchers, to make sure that the solutions are evidence-based and they just have a faster acceleration from, ideation all the way to the point where the product is in the market. And thus, the TECA program was born. It was supported by FSD Africa and FCDO. And since then, it has run 3 cohorts. So supported about 100 entrepreneurs across Africa, so East Africa and West Africa, develop solutions in the blue economy, for the blue economy, for the green economy. And now there's a new cohort in Nigeria looking for urban solutions, so urban heat solutions. And what we are focused in, or rather the area we wanted to target, is particularly adaptation and resilience, because this area and the solutions in this area are deeply underfunded. We find that only 10% of funding, climate investment funding, goes to these solutions, whereas 90% goes to mitigation. We know mitigation is obviously more trackable in the short term. Selling solar panels and electric vehicles, the return is much more clear than adaptation and resilience, where this is a long-term play because you're preparing people for the inevitable, and the returns will be much further down the line. So that's the TECA program in a nutshell. Yeah, I don't know if you have.
What is it? What is it? So I really wanted to slightly change the subject, but this one is too tempting. What is it exactly? The technical assistant you're delivering, is that like coaching? Is like research? Is like sales support? Is partnership support? What is it exactly? Is all of the above?
Yeah. So it's actually all the above, but I'll break it down. So it starts as very generalized training. So
I want to become a coach, Shirley. Hire me as a coach. I'll work for free.
Yes. So it starts a generalized support. As I mentioned, we have the Catalyst Fund, which obviously sources for climate tech solutions. They are more at the level where you have an MVP and you have some traction, and then they come and accelerate you. And we found that there was not a lot of solutions. There was a dearth of solutions in that space. And again, that it was a demand-driven program. So what does it start with? It's even creating awareness, right? What does a climate tech solution look like? What does a climate plus tech plus finance solution look like in the blue economy? I remember the first when we decided blue economy was the first sector we're going to look at. Everyone's like, why the blue economy? What is there? Why do we have to do anything there? So the first thing we did is obviously have what we called webinars, or we call them expeditions, more of to learn what are the opportunities within the small fisheries sector, or the aquaculture sector, or the or coral reef restoration. Is there a revenue generating opportunity there? So it's broadening the minds of talent and change makers within Africa to be able to see what opportunities lie in this area. Then infusing that with experts, researchers that have been working within these areas to work together in a classroom, ideate, and come up with concepts. Then taking them to the communities they aim to target or provide these solutions to, and testing those. So it's even working with them as researchers who have been in the space to really test out their solutions and get feedback, all the way to finding what's the next leg of funding that you need now that you have a product and you have a few customers. You need additional funding to keep going. How can we link you to other partners who can continue that journey with you? So again, it starts from a very general training and support and coaching, all the way to building together, and then to coaching you through the later stages post you being in the program. And it has been a humbling experience. Yeah.
Amazing. Actually, offline, just before starting this podcast, I was officially inviting you to the Inclusive FinTech Forum in Kigali, 12th to 14th of in March next year. And actually, I really would love you to come and speak at our talent track. We have a talent track.
Amazing.
And one of the top is all about capacity building, upskilling, the financial literacy. And it's actually 10th to 12th of March. It's always a binary choice. It's in that week, but it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 10 to 12 of March 2026 in Kigali. And you can go to inclusivefintechforum.com for more information. Capacity building is going to be front and center of that conference. And this is how I want to, let's say, finish our conversation for today. And where do you think is the name of the game in the talent opportunities in Africa? Is it in working on the basis of the pyramid, giving like a basic digital skills to like hundreds of millions of people? Because if there are more or less 500 million financially excluded in the continent, but the non-financial literate are actually way more than that. Is it by multiplying the effort in creating the next generation of job creators? So the people who, the entrepreneurs, the new Nala, the new Tala, the new, the Flutter Waves that will hire thousands of talents. So, which are obviously a minority, the next generation of founders. Or is also like working with the clearly the academia that today, and the universities and the business schools around across the continent that are clearly today not equipped to to give that sort of education to so many millions of people. And I know that we are not solving it here, especially in the last 5 minutes of this podcast, but just give us a couple of tips based on your own experience, and we will talk more in Kigali.
Yeah. Matteo, that's a tough question to ask. If I knew the answer to that, I wouldn't even be sitting on this podcast, right?
No, you would, but you would probably have found one yourself, exactly. And we will be talking about your third book on capacity building, right?
Yes, I guess so. But I think the thing is, we'd have to pull in different directions to get the solution right. You almost cannot pull one way and expect it to be the be it all in terms of a solution for problems that are really systemic and deep. And what did you used to call it in economics, where there are very many factors that lead to that particular problem. So you have to tackle it at different elements. There's a policy question. So who's pulling policy, right? Because you can be innovative, and yes, innovation goes ahead of policy, but ultimately, if the policy is defeating, then innovation does not stand to succeed. You can do financial literacy, but then do you stop providing products until everyone is like well equipped to take on the information or digital literacy? We have solutions like I think there's promise in AI, for instance, in overcoming some of these challenges. We've seen innovations where initially someone had to have a smartphone to access data or to access information, but there are certain experiments where AI is being used as a voice coach to teach different elements on someone who has just a basic phone and a connection, basic, a line. So there are certain innovations that are also overcoming those barriers, because there are people you can push to the next level. Others, it takes a very long time. So it's, again, segmenting your client base and really understanding how you intervene. Then there's the element of the products that we continue to provide. They really must adapt to the realities of the continent and of the people they aim to serve. One of the things that, particularly in the credit space, and we have talked about it for so long, credit continues to be so rigid for those that really need it, does not match the realities of the African continent, where informality is very high, incomes are seasonal or sporadic. But till today, a lot of credit providers are fixed in terms of their terms. Are we really serving the segment? There's a question around that. In terms of investing in job creators, so part of our programs is the Job Tech Alliance, which really works with job tech platforms that provide employment at scale, especially in this digital world. Just making sure that as they're doing that, the jobs that they provide are quality jobs and they're well equipped to do that. So it's a matter of pulling at different angles at what could be the solution to the problem. And it's not always easy. Building ecosystems that do this and speak to each other and reinforce each other is one of the biggest challenge. But Matteo, you're an ecosystem builder, and that's why people like you exist, or organizations like yours exist.
Thank you so much. But I really feel like sometimes I really feel like I'm trying to empty the ocean with a spoon. Sometimes, and some other times, I wake up with full of optimism. I think there is an element, but I don't want to talk about it here, of crowd learning, of being, because there is no way that it can be a top down approach. Somehow it has to be as you rightly said, different angles, different levels, and also a lot of interaction to leverage the multiplying of the efforts. Anyway, it's a fascinating journey, and I can see in the past 10 years, since 2015, we have made a lot of progress in every single item or topics we talked about. In some others, but sometimes the last mile is the harder, right? So it was not easy, but it was tangible, the progress made in the past 10 years. The next 10 are probably impact not as many people, but the work is probably going to be a bit harder. I agree. Shirley, thank you so much for being with us. It was an amazing show. Thank you.
Thanks, Matteo. And I look forward to engaging with you in Kigali next year. And continue doing the great work and bringing insights to us. So thank you.
Oh, by all means. Guys, that was episode 12. It makes the first year of Breaking Banks Africa, and I could not be happier to have handed up this first year with Shirley, and this is a wrap. Thanks for listening to Breaking Banks Africa, a Provoke Media podcast in cooperation with timepledge.org. Don't forget to share us out or shout out across social media. If there is something or someone you would like to hear on our cast, let us know. See you next month on Breaking Banks Africa.